start whenever.
Whenever you're
I'll
ready.
leave the cards. I got mine. All right. Let's go. All right. So my refutation speech and the claim I am responding to today is animals do not belong in zoos. Now, my opponent's secondary claims are: 1, conservation over exploitation; 2, the wall created for safety of humans and animals is being broken; and 3, animals experience mental trauma similar to humans. So, for my first response to secondary claim 1, conservation or exploitation. According to National Geographic, the panda was upgraded from endangered to vulnerable on the red list of threatened species managed by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which is a big deal. This is because an animal is close to facing extinction. They went from that to endangered, and then from endangered to now they're a threatened species, which is good because now the species is living on. Not only does conservation help battle extinction, but also reduces hunting and poaching of endangered species with restrictive laws. So when a species become endangered, basically there's laws and sanctions placed where people cannot hunt the species, people can't go and collect ivory tusks, for example, and yeah. That leads me on to the assumption that there is a lack of fear and also a lack of survival skills when reintroduced into the wild is inaccurate. To my previous knowledge, many of the traits necessary for an animal survival in the wild are genetically and inherited and cannot be affected by living in a zoo. Thus, you can never get rid of an animal's instincts. They're always going to have their instincts. With that being said, according to Canadian Federation of Humane Societies, workers provide the animal in their zoos with the necessary obstacle similar to the manner that they would encounter in the wild. So for an example, if an elephant is required to dig or forage for their food, they put the same obstacle for them so they could actually do have a similar way of eating what they would in the wild. Or for a tiger, they would put its prey in there and the tiger would have to stalk and kill its prey like how it would in the wild. So if it were reintroduced, it could better adapt to being out in the wild. Now, my opponent believes that animals are exploited by zoos to make a profit. And I'm going to tell you how that is inaccurate. However, animals may be to some degree exploited for profit. According to the National Wildlife Federation, the money that zoos make are used towards the national action agenda for preventing wildlife from becoming endangered. So yes, they do make money off of it, but rather than have the money for personal gain, they use that to go back to the animals and help the efforts of not making them endangered. This leads me to my response of secondary claim number 2. The wall created for safety of humans and animals is being broken. If the safety of humans and animals was really in danger, then the zoos would not be open today. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission states that the likelihood of a serious injury by a random attack is roughly 1 to 2.4 million. It may be true that in the few cases of animal attacks, the animal has been the victim on their just acting upon their instincts. My opponent used the whole the situation what happened with Harambe. And the animal may have not been the victim if it wasn't for the zoo. Basically saying, yeah, the zoo did make the animal the victim of the issue. However, in the case of Harambe, who was an endangered silverback gorilla that was held in Cincinnati Zoo, he might not even survive that long in the wild. The reason why they're going endangered is because people are poaching, people are killing them. That's the reason why they're going endangered. So I know it's unfortunate what happened at the zoo, but you gotta think of it, he might not even made it that long if he would have been out in the wild. Zoos should not be frowned upon solely because of the irresponsibility of one person. It's unfortunate that it happened. However, as I previously stated, what are the chances of an incident like that even happening? And this leads to my response to secondary claim number 3, which is animals experience mental trauma similar to humans. Animals experience mental trauma, that is true. There is no denying that. This, according to Mark Beckhoff from Psychology Today, states that whether all animals or some experience trauma is unclear. Now, animals can experience trauma either by being in the wild or being in the zoo. It's not just because you're in the zoo. Animals have emotions similar, not fully similar to us, but they do have emotions. If they experience a traumatic experience in life where one of their loved ones dies, then that they can still be haunted from that, and that doesn't have to be in a zoo. That can be out in the wild. Now, my opponent used the case of Gus the polar bear, stating his abnormal behavior was due to his captivity, which he coined the term zoochosis. The real reason for his neurotic behavior was not due to being in a zoo, but was due because he had a tumor. Now, living in the zoo might have actually helped Gus save a couple of years. If he was out in the wild and he had cancer, who's going to help treat the cancer? There's no doubt that lots of money was spent on Gus the polar bear, but that is because zookeepers thought his neurotic behavior could be fixed, so the zoo tried helping him. Instead, the doctors found a tumor. So in regards of the term zoochosis, there is no real scientific proof which backs this term up. This is just a belief and a claim of what scientists think animals may have. It is not scientifically proven. And my conclusion, zoos have been falsely frowned upon. If it weren't for zoos, many of the endangered species would now be extinct. Animals cannot be compared to humans because humans are the ones who are taking care of the animals, and animals, yes, they have feelings, emotions, similar traits to humans, but again, they're not humans, and like I said, they have wild instincts. And that's all. Thank you.
Harambe.
I know.
Hey, better than last time.
Dude, that was awesome.
I loved it.
I'm so excited about it. That's good shit, man.
That's part of your Harambe argument.
I don't know.
I didn't know about it.
Okay, so that was.
I really thought that.
Trust me.
Yeah. Perfectly laid
Let
out.
go your outline. I'll just go over it again.
All right, David, I thought that you did a good job telling us, reminding us of what the advocate's claim was, summarizing it pretty clearly, previewing at the beginning, so that's going to make it easy for us to follow. You signpost the first point as you get to it. The conservation issue, I think that you need a little bit more information to demonstrate your point, although I think you've got a good example with the panda and how it went from being endangered to vulnerable. One of the things that's missing, though, here is the link to a zoo. In other words, why is it that the zoos are the ones that have resulted in the pandas moving from being endangered to vulnerable? And that was not clear. I think you do make the same kind of argument in other places, and I think we can understand how you were getting to that point. But there's a big inference there, and it would be nice if there was some data that pointed in that direction, or even an explanation, that zoos have done breeding programs that have kept the pandas from dying out, or that they treat diseases, they've discovered diseases that animals have, and then they're able to wipe those diseases out both in the zoos and in the wild. I don't know what all the things might be, but I think you've got the right idea here. There just needs to be a little bit more information on that counterclaim, because that's an important counterclaim on the argument. What I also liked was that you kind of went after that entertainment exploitation issue pretty effectively. I don't remember what the advocate's evidence was on this point, and I think maybe you might want to challenge them a little bit more on that. But you have this argument that says that the zoos use the money for these other purposes. And I think that that's good information. I think that what you've got so far is really solid. It would be nice if we had a little bit more information on this. And I don't think there would be a problem with maybe you're also making a comparative example, a hypothetical, for instance, that shows how, don't assume that the LA Zoo or the San Diego Zoo is like Disneyland, or it's like Knott's Berry Farm, bringing in tons of money, and then they're doing all these things with the money, and they're stockholders and all that sort of thing. My guess is most zoos are run by exactly what you talked about, conservation groups. They are organizations that are interested in animal welfare. They are not public entities that people get stock returns from, that sort of thing. And I think that would be the kind of thing to point out. You've said that. I just think you need a little bit more information on that. And you could even make that argument, I think, a description. Who ever heard of a stockholder in, the San Diego Zoo? Maybe in SeaWorld, but not in the San Diego Zoo. And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about zoos. So I think you could follow up a little bit more with that. On the wall of safety being broken, I think that you did a nice job confronting the Harambe situation. I do think that you might want to have some evidence, because you kind of just used this generic evidence that you had at the beginning about animals being endangered in the wild, that they are hunted, they're poachers and doing all those kinds of things. I think that's one of the things that you want to point out, is that the silverback gorillas, their populations have decreased in a number of years over time, and so they've gone from whatever it is, 50,000 to 10,000 in the last 20 years, and zoos are the ones that are taking them in and protecting them from this kind of poaching. They're doing the best they can in the wild also, but the truth is, Harambe could have been one of those 40,000 that disappeared very easily, and he was in a zoo for a long period of time where it was relatively safe. And then we had a very rare accident. And I like the statistic that you found. The odds of something like this happening, 1 in 1.2 million. That sounds like it's highly unlikely. All right. And I think you could also maybe describe some of the incidents that the advocate talked about and said, these were very unusual circumstances where these sorts of things happen. It's not like some random person most of them were crazy people, or there was a kid who they couldn't stop from doing something even though his parents had practically beat him before he jumped in with the gorilla, that sort of thing. So those are unusual circumstances. So I think there's a little bit more forceful argument to be made, although I think you made the right argument on that particular point. And then on the trauma issue, I need the source citation on this polar bear with the tumor. I mean, I assume it's the same source that the advocate used. I don't know, but suddenly he's got this zoocosis, and the polar bear's doing all these weird behaviors, repetitive behaviors, and something. And you turn around and say, "Well, Gus had a tumor, and that's why he's doing that." And I'm going, "Well, how do you know that? Where did that come from? Did you just pull that out of your hat?"
And I had the source, but I was just in a rush.
And that's what you need to do. You need to cite this kind of thing. You'd say it was Devin's speech, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you'd say, Devin cited this article here when he talked about Gus the polar bear and zoocosis and that sort of thing. Well, I followed up, and Gus the polar bear is a well-known example, and other people have written about it, and here's what somebody else said about this particular thing, or here's what the zoo where Gus is found said about this sort of thing. And this concept of zoocosis has been widely attacked by scholars in the field of animal behavior in zoos, and say it's just an invention of PETA type people who think there's something wrong with any animal being in the thing. I like the description that you've got. I just think that you need to have the information in the speech cited a little bit more. You did that on a couple of the other a couple of the other points, but it wasn't as clear there. And then of course you're doing a good job. You did a pretty good job looking at the audience. I mean, you're doing some reading, but it's not too bad. Most of it is about the evidence that you've got. You look up and speak to us pretty well. And then you finish off with the Porky Pig exit, which we don't want. All right? Yeah, so let's avoid that in the future. Okay, thank you.